Hey, Seawolf community, Chancellor Sandine here with another segment of Ask a UAA Expert. Take a look.
Hi, this is Dr. Cindy Canal. I'm the immunologist here at Alaska WWAMI, Alaska's medical school on the campus of UAA. Today I'm going to be addressing some questions about the vaccine trials for SARS-CoV-2, the virus that causes coronavirus disease 2019, or COVID-19 for short. What is the goal of a vaccine and how does it work? The goal of a vaccine is to generate protective immunity in a person who's vaccinated. What that means is that if that vaccinated person should come into contact with the germ that is the target of the vaccine, so in this case, SARS-CoV-2, they would not become sick or come down with COVID-19. They would, in essence, be protected from getting that disease. So what does that protection look like? Well, basically it's in three components. The first is neutralizing antibody. Those antibodies prevent the virus from infecting your cells. The second part of the protection are helper T cells. As the name implies, they help the B cells make those antibodies that are going to stop the virus from infecting your cells. And the third part of the protection are cytotoxic or killer T cells. These T cells can kill virally infected cells. So any cells that happen to get virus in them, these T cells will kill them and keep you from getting sick. Now, in order to use a vaccine, we need to test it and make sure it can do what we want it to do, that is, generate protective immunity, before we give it to everyone else. How do we test a vaccine to know it will generate protective immunity? Like medical devices, drugs, and biologics, vaccines must be tested in a clinical trial before the Food and Drug Administration approves them for use in everyone. Currently, there are 7 vaccines in clinical trials for SARS-CoV-2. There are 3 that will start in May, an additional 3 that will start in May, and then an additional 4 trials will start over the summer. So we're going to have quite a few different vaccines in trials in just the next couple of months. These clinical trials are broken up into 3 parts, and a 4th part called preclinical testing. Preclinical testing is done in research animals with the goal of making sure that the vaccine is safe and that it can potentially do what we want it to do in people, which is provide protective immunity. Fortunately, the 7 vaccines that are currently in clinical trials, most if not all of them have given good to excellent results in those preclinical testing models. And what this tells us is that the designs are probably pretty good to generate protective immunity, and we might be able to shorten the time that it takes in clinical trial in order to prove that the vaccine is safe and effective to generate protective immunity. The clinical trials part of the vaccine testing is really broken down into 3 parts. Phase 1, which is happening right now in those 7 vaccines I mentioned, really looks at, is it safe in people? It also starts to get the first indication of whether the vaccine can actually generate an immune response in the people who get vaccinated. And we can do that by taking a small sample of blood from these individuals who have been vaccinated and look for those 3 parts of the protective immunity I mentioned in the beginning: the neutralizing antibodies, the helper T cells, and the cytotoxic or killer T cells. And we can do those tests in the laboratory. Once we have that data, we can go on to phase 2. And a couple of the vaccines are already moving into phase 2 trials. Phase 2 tests the vaccine in several hundred people. And the goal here is to measure what's called efficacy. And efficacy just means that the product being tested, or in this case, the vaccine against SARS-CoV-2, will actually generate protective immunity. And again, we can measure that in the individuals who get vaccinated by taking a small sample of blood and looking for those 3 protective components in the laboratory: the neutralizing antibodies, the helper T cells, and the cytotoxic or killer T cells. Once we have that data, the last phase, or that phase 3, we start testing the vaccine in thousands of people across the entire country. And the goal of the phase 3 part of the clinical trial is to actually demonstrate that the vaccine is protecting those individuals from getting COVID-19 that is caused by the virus SARS-CoV-2. The clinical trial in all these 3 phases takes time. It takes time to recruit all the volunteers who are going to be vaccinated. It takes time for their immune systems to generate that protective immune response in their own bodies. And it takes time for us to collect all the data that proves that the vaccine actually prevents those individuals from becoming sick. What can we do while we're waiting for the clinical trials to progress through phases 1, 2, and 3? So while we're waiting for those clinical trials to get through phases 1, 2, and 3, there are 5 things that we can all do to help keep us safe. First, and you probably figured what I was going to say already, and if I didn't say it, you'd be mad at me, and that's wash your hands. 20 seconds, you're going to sing happy birthday to yourself more times than you probably have in your entire life, but it's just something we got to do. Secondly, physical distancing. It's not physical distancing with the people you live with, but it's physical distancing when you're out in public. Make sure you're staying 6 feet away from folks. It's really important to protect you and to protect them. Third, mask it up. Whether it's a scarf, a homemade mask, a surgical mask that you've picked up somewhere, just make sure you're wearing it when you're out in public and you can't maintain that 6 feet of distance. Good example, when you go to the grocery store, you should be wearing a mask. It's protecting you potentially. It's definitely protecting the people that you're coming into contact, such as the clerks who are checking you out at the cash register. We want to keep them safe because they're essential workers, like so many people are these days. Fourth, listen to the public health specialists out there. They're giving us good advice, and make sure you're abiding by and following the health mandates that are coming out from our local, state, and federal officials, and the recommendations that our public health experts are giving us. They're trying to protect each and every one of us. And fifth and final thing is, while you're waiting for those clinical trials, the vaccine tests to get through phases 1 and 2, think about whether you might be willing to be one of the volunteers in phase 3. Because there's probably a chance that phase 3 trials will come to Alaska, because they're going to want to test those vaccines in lots of people, in lots of different places across the entire country. So, If you're interested, you can get the latest information about the vaccine trials by searching clinicaltrials.gov on the web. And then within that website, you can search SAR-CoV-2 for SARS-CoV-2 or COVID-19 vaccine to get the latest up-to-date information about the clinical trials for the vaccines that are happening right now and will be continuing on throughout the rest of this year and into early 2021. Thanks for listening, and I hope I've given you some information that you found helpful today.